All right, so today in the first 15-ish minutes of class, we're going to be wrapping up chapter wrapping up chapter 1 and getting started on chapter 2. And we'll be spending most of our time today talking about the balance sheet. But at the end of the session today, we're going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about the adaptive learning system, because you'll have your first adaptive learning chapter quiz this weekend. Right? The way the adaptive learning chapter quizzes work, you'll always have the adaptive learning chapter quiz the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday following the week where we finish our work in the chapter together. And since we're finishing our work in chapter 2, since we're finishing our work in chapter 1 today, you'll have your chapter 1 adaptive learning quiz on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You've got a 3-day window to go in and do the assignment. So we'll talk a little bit about that process at the end of class today. We're going to start with a quick wrap up of chapter 1. And there's really not very much left in chapter 1. I mentioned that we are not going to learn how to prepare the statement of cash flows together. All right, we'll talk a little bit about the big picture of the statement of cash flows, but the first chapter that you have in Accounting 2 will be an entire chapter on the preparation of the statement of cash flows. Right? The statement of cash flows, as the name indicates, is a look at the sources and uses of cash in a business. Right? It's a very different financial statement than the income statement, the retained earnings statement / statement of stockholders' equity, and the balance sheet. Because the statement of cash flows uses and follows the cash basis of accounting. The income statement, the retained earnings statement, and the balance sheet follow what we call the accrual basis. And we'll be talking a good bit about cash basis versus accrual basis over the next several chapters. They're two very, very different ways of looking at the world. When it comes to cash basis accounting, the triggering event for the recognition of transactions is cash flow. If you pay cash, it's an expense, and you record an expense. If you receive cash, it's a revenue, and you call it a revenue. So under the cash basis of accounting, if you haven't received any cash yet, you don't have any revenues. Under the cash basis of accounting, if you haven't paid any cash, you don't have any expenses. It's a relatively simple way to look at the world. You and I, we live our lives on the cash basis. And we think about cash, and it makes sense. Cash is king. Cash is very important to daily life. Our income tax returns, those of you that file an income tax return, they're prepared on a cash basis. But publicly traded companies are not allowed to prepare their financial statements, at least most of them, on the cash basis. Instead, they have to follow the accrual basis. And the triggering event under the accrual basis is the contract. And we've talked already about how important contracts are. It's when a contract is formed that revenue is recognized. It's when a contract is formed that expenses are recognized, even if the cash flow hasn't happened yet. Because the accrual basis of accounting looks at legal rights and legal obligations. And revenue is recognized when a business is legally entitled to that revenue, when the contract has been formed. But they may not get paid until the future. Same thing with expenses. So we'll talk about the accrual basis a little bit more in Chapter 2. And we'll see examples of it in Chapters 3 and 4. It's a different kind of accounting, a little bit more complex than the cash basis. The income statement, the retained earnings statement, the statement of stockholders' equity, the balance sheet, they all follow the accrual basis of accounting. But the statement of cash flows follows the cash basis. It's kind of off on its own, doing its own thing. It's different than the other financial statements, and it's the last one that gets prepared. And last time we talked about how the financial statements flow together, how the income statement flows into the retained earnings statement, and how the retained earnings statement flows into the balance sheet. The statement of cash flows doesn't flow anywhere. It's off on its own, doing its own thing. But it shows the comings and goings of cash, which of course is a very, very important asset. And the cash flows are classified according to the three kinds of business activities that we talked about as we examined the life cycle of a business. Your statement of cash flows shows you inflows of cash and outflows of cash relating to operating activities, investing activities, and financing activities. So it's organizing the information in a little bit different way than the other financial statements. Cash receipts from operating activities, that's just the cash basis equivalent of revenue. But total revenue on an income statement is not going to be the same as cash receipts from operating activities on a statement of cash flows because of the two different bases of accounting. Cash payments for operating activities, that's the cash basis version of expenses. So we don't use the same terms because revenue and expense are accrual accounting terms. And you won't see the words revenues and expenses anywhere on a statement of cash flows because it's a cash basis statement. So, excuse me, you don't have to know how to prepare this. You will not have any homework that requires you to prepare line by line the statement of cash flows. You could get a multiple choice question on your adaptive learning chapter quiz that asks you something big picture-y about the statement of cash flows, but you're not going to have to prepare it. You'll do that in accounting too. But you'll note that the statement of cash flows is one of the few financial statements that makes heavy use of items in parentheses, right? On most of our other financial statements, the income statement, the retained earnings statement, the balance sheet, we don't see numbers in parentheses very much because on accrual-based financial statements, numbers in parentheses are mostly indicating negative values. On a statement of cash flows, however, the numbers that are in parentheses are indicating outflows of cash. An outflow of cash is a payment. So any numbers that are in parentheses on a statement of cash flows indicates that the company paid cash, where the quote unquote positive numbers are inflows of cash or cash receipts. So you have a lot of numbers that are in parentheses on a statement of cash flows. But again, not because they're negative values. It's indicating inflows and outflows. Right? So get a big picture understanding of the statement of cash flows as a financial statement. Right? Chapter 1 then concludes with a little bit of information about an annual report. Now, we've seen this screen a couple times now, and we'll see it a couple more times, because this really summarizes the first 4 chapters, what we're learning about in the first 4 chapters. And chapters 1 and 2 are all about communication. How do we communicate? With the financial statements. But we also communicate with an annual report. That is the communication tool between a corporation, a publicly traded corporation, and its shareholders, as well as creditors and other parties. And as you can see, the financial statements are a part of the annual report, but a very small part. The financial statements themselves on an annual report, 6, 7, 8 pages. Probably not any more than that. The annual report itself, though, easily 100 pages long, maybe even more, 150, 200 pages. I've seen some big annual reports. But the financial statements are one small piece of the annual report. Most of the annual report, about half of the annual report, is taken up by a section called Management's Discussion and Analysis. And all that this is, and it's, again, it's like 50, 60 pages long. This is public relations, PR. This is a big, giant advertisement for the company. This is the senior management of the company saying, hey, we are great. We're great. Give us your money. Invest in us. And those of you that are already owners, invest more. It's public relations. The first half of an annual report is really nothing more than a glorified advertisement. And you're a good halfway through the annual report in terms of page turning before you come to the actual financial statements. And again, they're not very long. 5, 6, 7 pages. And then the other half of the annual report are footnotes, just like in a research paper. As we say in English language, the devil is in the details. The notes to the financial statements are where you will find all of the details. Illustrations and explanations of all the information that's presented in the financial statements themselves. 50, 60 pages of footnotes. So half of an annual report is an advertisement, and half of it is accounting information. And one page is devoted to a document called an auditor's report. And auditing is very important. A financial statement audit is an investigation. Publicly traded companies in the United States are required by law to have their financial statements investigated by objective CPAs. And for the big publicly traded companies, they're using one of the big four accounting firms. And auditors that work for the big four accounting firms, they are like investigators. I know some of you have seen those investigation shows on TV, like Crime Scene Investigation and some of those procedural shows, right? A financial statement audit is an investigation. It's just a financial one. And the auditors of a publicly traded company, they make sure that the financial statements are prepared properly, that the financial statements follow what are called the rules of GAAP. We'll talk more about GAAP in chapter 2. But GAAP are the rules of accounting in the United States. Stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. It's the rules of accounting. So the auditors investigate, and they make sure that the financial statements are accurate. It's an expensive process. IBM pays tens of millions of dollars a year to its auditing firm. I think it's PricewaterhouseCoopers, for the auditors of PwC to come in and audit the financial statements. But it's mandated by law. The auditor's report is 1 page long. IBM pays millions for that 1 page report. But without it, they can't sell their stock on the stock markets. Okay. So I have posted to Blackboard in the handouts section for chapter 1. I've given you a great little document. See if I can find it. Here it is. It's produced by Merrill Lynch. It's called How to Read a Financial Report. I think you'll find it very interesting reading. You might want to glance at it a little bit for chapter 1, but it's something that you'll probably want to look at in the future. Because most of you will probably, once you get a real job after you graduate from college, you're going to want to start thinking about saving for retirement. And this will give you really good information on how to understand financial information. Okay. And I really encourage you, if you're looking for a good elective course to take, we have a course, it's BSAD 111. It's called Personal Finance. That is a really, really good course to take because it teaches you a lot of life lessons. Talks about investing and saving and buying a house and budgeting. Really, really good course. And you would make use of this document if you were to take BSAD 111. And we have 3 electives in the business degree program. All right. I'm not sure why you're having trouble getting to the PDF. If you email me, I can send it to you, but I'm not sure why you're having trouble getting it. Sounds like a Blackboard issue, but send me an email and I can attach it. All right. So peruse the annual report or how to read a financial report. I think you'll find that very useful. If you've got password issues, you got to get in touch with IT help desk. Right. Now, another thing that I would encourage you to do, go online and pull up some annual reports on your own. Right? Go to a publicly traded company that you're interested in knowing about. I just pulled up Coca-Cola here at random. Right? It's very, very easy to find annual reports for publicly traded companies. Just go to their homepage. Now, Coca-Cola is unusual. Usually you got to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and there'll be a part at the very bottom, where you have the contact us links. And there'll be a link that's called something like information for investors. Coca-Cola is a little unusual because it's right up here at the top. But when you click on investors, it takes you to a link for all the different financial information. And under filings and reports, you can get the annual reports for Coca-Cola. They call it an annual review, just a different name for the same thing. But there's annual reports for Coca-Cola going back for quite a while. Right? So I encourage you to just check out some different companies. I will tell you, though, that you'll find it easier to read the annual report form than the 10K filings. The 10K filings are the filings that are given to the Securities and Exchange Commission. And they're usually just a little bit denser and harder to read. They follow a little bit different format. So I think you'll find annual reviews to be a little bit more interesting. But I think when you look at the financial statements, you'll be very surprised to see how much of the financial statements you can already understand just being one chapter into the course. Right? So I encourage you to check out some companies. Right? So that wraps up our work